What if the person you lost has something to ask of you today, and you haven't heard them? Not because you don't love them, not because they don't cross your mind, but because no one ever told you that there are days in the year when the distance between the living and those who have passed grows thin in a way that happens at no other time. And that on those days, the souls are not silent. They are waiting for someone on this side of that invisible threshold to do something concrete, something specific, something they can no longer do for themselves. Today is one of those days. And Saint Teresa of Avila knew exactly what they are asking of you. Saint Teresa of Avila did not speak of the souls in purgatory from a distance, the way someone might who had only read about them in books. She spoke from closeness, the closeness of someone who had known them. She spoke from the nights in her cell in Avila, from the visions that left her trembling, from the certainty of someone who had seen with the eyes of the soul what no bodily eye can reach. And one of the things she wrote with the greatest insistence is this: the departed are not mute. They have real requests directed at the living. And those requests come with greater force during the times the Church has marked as seasons of extraordinary grace. Write in the comments right now the name of the loved one you are carrying in your heart today. Because what you are about to hear was set aside for you and for them long before you lost them. You need to hear all of it, because each request that is coming depends on having understood the one before it, and together they form something that can change what happens in your loved one's soul from this day forward. Before you can hear what the souls are asking, you need to understand who these souls are. Not as a concept, not as a word that appears in the rosary and in masses for the dead without anyone ever stopping to ask what it truly means, but as a living reality, concrete, present, real, that Saint Teresa of Avila knew in a way that very few human beings in the history of the Church have ever known. Saint Teresa of Avila had a relationship with the departed that was not devotional in any superficial sense. She was not simply a pious woman who prayed for her dead and lit candles for them at church. She was someone who had received the extraordinary gift of perceiving the presence of those souls, of understanding something of their condition, of being used by God as an instrument of intercession on their behalf. In the book of her life, Saint Teresa of Avila describes with a precision that still moves us today how certain souls would come to her after death, how she could sense the state they were in, and how on several occasions she knew with an inner certainty that a particular soul had reached salvation, or that it was still in the process of purification. These were not vague impressions. They were certainties she herself brought to her confessors and spiritual directors, and which the Church, in examining her life, found no reason to dismiss. But what exactly are these souls she spoke of? The Catholic faith, which Saint Teresa of Avila did not merely know, but had made bone of her bone and flesh of her spirit, teaches that the human soul does not die with the body, that at the moment of death something occurs that the Catechism calls the particular judgment. The soul stands before God and receives in that instant the knowledge of its eternal destiny. Souls that have reached the perfection of love enter immediately into the beatific vision, heaven. Souls that have definitively rejected God suffer eternal condemnation. And then there is a third group, the group that concerns us most here, the group that filled Saint Teresa of Avila with the deepest compassion and urgency. Souls who died in the grace of God, in friendship with Him, but who still carry the weight of imperfections not entirely purged, of attachments not entirely overcome, of disordered loves that God's perfect love cannot allow in His presence without first purifying them. These souls go to purgatory. And purgatory, as Saint Teresa of Avila understood and described it, is not a place of punishment in the way we ordinarily think of punishment. It is a place of purification. It is the space where God's love, at once merciful and just, completes the work that began in life and that death interrupted before it was finished. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in her life that she had visions of purgatory, and what she perceived in those visions was not simply suffering. It was suffering accepted, suffering that the soul endures because it understands it is necessary, because it already has the certainty of its salvation and is only waiting for the purification that will allow it to enter into God's presence without the weight that still holds it back. But there is something that changes everything you thought you knew about the condition of those souls. Something Saint Teresa of Avila emphasized with an insistence her Carmelite sisters remembered decades after her death. And it is this: the souls in purgatory are not cut off from us. They are not in a world completely separate and sealed off. They exist within the body of Christ, which is the Church. And that body has one head and one life flowing through all its parts, both those still in this world and those who have already passed into the next. The communion of saints, that article of the Creed we recite without stopping to reflect on it, means precisely this: that there is a current of grace flowing between the living and the departed, that what we do here has consequences there, and that what they need there can be provided, at least in part, by what we do here. Saint Teresa of Avila did not live this as doctrine. She lived it as experience. When she prayed for a particular soul, she did not feel as though she was sending words into empty space. She felt that she was doing something real, something that arrived, something that produced a concrete effect in a reality her eyes could not see, but that her faith and her mystical experience confirmed was as solid as the stone walls of her convent. And that certainty is what you need to carry with you as you hear what comes next, because the requests the souls direct toward the living are not spiritual poetry. They are real requests from real people who are waiting for real responses from those who loved them and who can still do something for them. Hold on to this question as we go on. If souls can ask, and if we can answer, why do so many Catholics pass through Divine Mercy Sunday without knowing there are specific requests waiting to be answered? The answer has to do with something that happens on this particular Sunday, something the Church teaches, and that Saint Teresa of Avila, though she did not know this Sunday by the name we give it today, grasped in its essence with a clarity that very few have ever matched. There are days on the Church's calendar that are not like the others, not in appearance, not in the length of the hours, not in the light that comes through the windows, but in what takes place within the grace that God reserves for those moments. The Church did not organize its liturgical calendar arbitrarily. It organized it according to the logic of the mystery of salvation, marking certain times as seasons of special grace, times when God's mercy bends towards us with an intensity it does not carry on ordinary days. Divine Mercy. Sunday is one of those times, and to understand why what souls can ask on this day matters so deeply, you first need to understand what this Sunday carries within it. Divine Mercy. Sunday is the second Sunday after Easter. It is placed where it is because the Church wanted the extraordinary grace of the resurrection, which reaches its fullness on Easter Sunday, not to close abruptly, but to have one final moment of extraordinary outpouring before the ordinary Paschal season begins. It is as though the door that Christ opened with his resurrection remains wide open for 8 days, and then on this second Sunday, before it begins to close slowly, it swings open one final time with its full width, so that even those who arrived late can pass through, even those who were not ready, even those who have spent years feeling that grace no longer has room for them. The promise the Church attaches to this Sunday is a plenary indulgence for those who receive communion, go to confession, pray for the Holy Father's intentions, and approach this day with a truly repentant heart. A plenary indulgence is not a reward. It is the complete remission of the temporal punishment still due for sins already forgiven. In other words, it is exactly what souls in purgatory are enduring. And here is what Saint Teresa of Avila understood with a depth her words could barely contain. The plenary indulgence that a living person gains can be applied to a departed soul. The treasury of grace that opens on this Sunday is not reserved for those still walking this earth. It can be directed by the intention of the one who gains it toward a soul that can no longer gain it for itself. This is not a pious hope. It is church doctrine, grounded in the reality of the communion of saints we just spoke of. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that there is a genuine bond between the church militant, which is us, and the church suffering, which is the departed still being purified. That the suffrages of the faithful living, their prayers, masses, almsgiving, and indulgences offered on behalf of the departed are genuinely helpful to them and can ease their suffering. Saint Teresa of Avila did not need to read the Catechism to know this. She had lived it. She had experienced it personally each time she prayed for a particular soul, and felt in the deepest part of herself that the prayer was not falling into nothing but arriving where it needed to be. But something more happens on Divine Mercy Sunday beyond the plenary indulgence, something that touches the very nature of God's mercy and the way that divine attribute works in the times He Himself has marked as seasons of grace. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in the interior castle that there are moments when God seems to draw near to the soul with a generosity that overflows every human calculation. Moments when ordinary grace becomes extraordinary grace, not because God changes, but because the disposition of the liturgical time creates the conditions for the soul to receive more than it would at other moments. Divine Mercy Sunday is one of those moments, and the souls in purgatory know it. They feel it. And it is precisely for this reason that their requests toward the living arrive on this day with a particular urgency. What does God's mercy do on this Sunday for souls still being purified? Saint Teresa of Avila did not use those exact words because this Sunday did not yet bear its present name in her time. But the reality the name describes, the extraordinary outpouring of divine mercy at a moment marked by the Church, that she knew. And what she taught was this, that in seasons of special grace, what the living do for the departed carries a weight it would not carry at other times. That a Mass offered today is not the same as a Mass offered on an ordinary Tuesday in October. That a rosary prayed today with the intention of suffrages is not the same as a rosary prayed on any other day of the year. Not because prayer is worth more or less depending on the calendar, but because God, in His sovereign freedom and boundless mercy, has chosen certain moments to incline His grace in a special way toward those who need it most. The souls know this, and so today they are asking specific things of you. The first of those requests is the one that is hardest to hear, because it touches something many people would rather not look at. But it is also the most urgent, the one souls repeat most insistently, the one Saint Teresa of Avila described as the foundation without which everything else loses much of its power. The first thing souls are asking of you this Divine Mercy Sunday is this: go to confession, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not once you've sorted out certain matters you've been putting off for months, today. Go to confession today, or make a serious commitment to do so as soon as possible, because the state of your soul matters in a way no one ever quite explained to you, a way that Saint Teresa of Avila understood with a clarity her own words could barely sustain. To understand why this request comes first and not second or third, you need to understand something Saint Teresa of Avila repeats in different forms throughout all her writing, something that can be summed up in a single sentence. Grace travels through souls in grace. It is not that God is unable to use a soul in mortal sin for some good. God is all-powerful and does not depend on our condition to act. But the ordinary way in which grace passes from one soul to another the way in which the suffrages of the living reach the departed with their full power requires that the soul offering intercession be in communion with God. It requires that the connection be open, and mortal sin breaks the connection. Saint Teresa of Avila spoke of this with an image her Carmelite sisters held in their memory long after her death. A soul in mortal sin is like a spring whose waters have been diverted from their natural course. The spring still exists, the water still exists, but it does not reach where it should because something is blocking the way. Confession is the act that returns the water to its channel. Sacramental absolution restores the current of grace that sin had interrupted, and the moment that current is restored, the soul's capacity to serve as a channel of intercession for its departed ones is fully recovered. This does not mean that praying in a state of mortal sin has no value whatsoever. The Church does not teach that. But it does mean there is a real difference, measurable in spiritual terms, though not in human ones, between the prayer that rises from a soul in grace and the prayer that rises from a soul that has broken its bond with God. And the souls in purgatory perceived that difference. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in the book of her life that some souls who came to her after death asked with urgency for her intercession, and that she noticed how the effectiveness of that intercession depended in part on the spiritual state of the one offering it, not as a judgment, as the observation of someone who saw spiritual reality with a transparency very few human beings ever attain. But there is a dimension to this first request that goes beyond the effectiveness of suffrages, one that touches something even deeper in the hearts of those who love their departed. The souls in purgatory, according to the mystical tradition that Saint Teresa of Avila lived and interpreted, not only benefit from the prayers of the living, they also suffer in a particular way when they see those they loved in life drifting away from God. Not because their own destiny is affected, that is already secure, but because love does not die with death, and the love a mother has for her children, or a husband for his wife, or a sister for her brother, that love goes on existing in the soul, being purified with a clarity and intensity it never achieved in life. And that love, still real, still present, means the soul experiences something like anguish when it perceives that the person it loves is in spiritual danger. Saint Teresa of Avila understood this, and so when she spoke of praying for the departed, she never separated that act from the act of caring for one's own soul. She treated them as two sides of the same coin. To pray for your departed loved ones without tending your own spiritual life is, in her mystical logic, like trying to carry water in a broken vessel. The intention is good. The love that moves the gesture is real. But the instrument cannot fulfill its purpose if it is damaged. Today, on this Divine Mercy Sunday, if it has been a long time since you last went to confession, the first thing your loved one is asking is not for more rosaries. It is for you to go to the confessional, to be reconciled with God, to restore that current of grace, which is the most direct channel through which your love for them can become something that genuinely reaches them where they are. Saint Teresa of Avila did not soften this truth. She spoke it with the same warmth she brought to everything she said, but she spoke it whole without leaving anything out, because she knew that a half-truth saves no one. And there is something more this first request carries with it, something many people don't consider when they think about confession. When you go to confession, you don't only restore your own grace, you open the door to gaining the plenary indulgence this Sunday offers. And that plenary indulgence you can offer for your departed loved one. You can direct it through the explicit intention of your heart toward the soul of that person you are carrying today, the one who can no longer gain it for themselves. That is what your loved one is truly asking when they ask you to go to confession. They are not asking you to humble yourself for the sake of humiliation. They are asking you to open the door through which God's mercy can enter their soul through yours. There is a scene Saint Teresa of Avila described in the book of her life that no one who has read it can easily forget. Not because it is dramatic in any outward sense, but because it reveals, with a simplicity that catches you off guard, something that most Catholics know in theory, but very few have ever felt in the place where truths that change lives have to be felt before they become real. The scene takes place after the death of a priest who had been one of Saint Teresa of Avila's confessors. A man who had lived with imperfections, as all men do, but who had died in God's grace. Saint Teresa of Avila felt a strong inner urgency to offer suffrages for him, to ask her sisters to pray, to make sure masses were said in his intention. And some days later, according to her own account, that priest appeared to her with a face so luminous, she described it as someone who had just emerged from a long, dark prison into a day that has no sunset. He told her he had been freed, and what had freed him, what had completed his purification, was the Mass. Not simply prayer, not affectionate remembrance. The Mass offered for him with explicit intention and living faith. The second thing souls are asking of you this Divine Mercy Sunday is this: offer Mass for me. And this request is not simply one among several of equal weight. It is, in Saint Teresa of Avila's understanding and in the teaching of the Church, the most powerful of all. Because the Mass is not merely a prayer, it is the sacrifice of Christ made present in time. It is the same sacrifice of Calvary, offered again at the altar, carrying all the redemptive power it had on that Good Friday afternoon, but now available for the souls of today, for the departed of today, for the specific people we bring to the altar in the intention of our hearts. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in her own words, in The Way of Perfection, that the Holy Mass is the most effective remedy that exists for souls suffering in purgatory. She did not write it as a pious opinion. She wrote it as a conviction grounded in her experience of spiritual reality. She had seen, in the profound sense in which mystics seek, what happens in the soul of a departed person when the Mass is offered for them. She had perceived the relief, the advancement, the acceleration of the purification that suffrages produce. And so she pressed her Carmelite sisters never to stop requesting Masses for their departed loved ones, insisting that no other devotion, however beautiful and sincere, could substitute for that act. Why does the Mass carry such power? Saint Teresa of Avila did not explain this in scholastic terms. She explained it in terms of love. Christ offers himself in every Mass with the same love with which he offered himself on the cross. And that love, when directed toward a specific soul through the intention of the priest or of the one requesting the Mass, acts upon that soul with an effectiveness no private prayer, however fervent, can equal. Not because private prayers don't matter, they do, and enormously, but because the Mass is not the prayer of one man or one woman. It is the prayer of Christ himself, united to the entire Church, offered to the Father with an infinite value that depends neither on the holiness of the celebrant nor on the perfection of the one who requests it. On Divine Mercy, Sunday offering a Mass for your departed loved one carries the weight of all the grace this day holds within it. If you can ask for a Mass in their name, if you can speak with a priest and give him the name of that person so they may be included in the intention of the Eucharist, you will have done for them something that no gift, no keepsake, no tears shed over their photograph can come close to matching. And if you cannot arrange a specific Mass, if circumstances make that impossible, then what Saint Teresa of Avila taught is this: go to Mass, and in the moment of the consecration, that instant when the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, offer that moment for your departed loved one. Say it from the heart. Say it with conviction. Say it with the confidence of someone who knows that God hears what the heart says in silence just as clearly as he hears what the lips speak aloud. Because the second request of your departed loved one is not complicated. They are not asking something beyond your reach. They are asking you to bring them to the altar, to use the one instrument that can reach them where they are with the power their condition requires. And Divine Mercy Sunday is the day when that instrument carries in its hands the added weight of the extraordinary grace this season holds. There is an image Saint Teresa of Avila used for the rosary that her Carmelite sisters never forgot. She spoke of it as a ladder of light that descends, not rises, as we tend to imagine when we pray, picturing our words climbing toward God from below. It descends. The Virgin Mary takes the Hail Marys her children pray on earth and transforms them into something that reaches down to the places where souls are still waiting, as though each mystery contemplated were a rung of light arriving where the darkness of purification has not yet been fully overcome. This image is not systematic theology. It is mystical experience translated into the only language Saint Teresa of Avila truly trusted, the language of love made concrete in an act. The third thing souls are asking of you this Divine Mercy Sunday is this: don't forget me in your rosary. And this request has a quality that sets it apart from the two before it. Confession restores the channel of grace in the living soul. The Mass acts with the power of Christ's sacrifice upon the soul of the departed. The rosary does something different, something Saint Teresa of Avila described with a word that in her mouth never sounded abstract. It accompanies. The rosary accompanies the soul that is suffering. It reminds them they are not alone. It brings the presence of the Virgin Mary, the mother of all who are within the body of Christ, both those journeying in this world and those waiting in the next. Saint Teresa of Avila's devotion to Our Lady was not ornamental. It was structural. By that I mean, for her the Virgin Mary was not simply a beautiful figure from the history of salvation. She was an active presence, a real intercessor, someone who moved within the spiritual lives of her children with an effectiveness that Saint Teresa of Avila's mystical experience had confirmed again and again. And when she spoke of the rosary prayed for the departed, what she meant is this: each time we pray that rosary, we are inviting the Virgin Mary into the space where our loved one is, and asking her to exercise there the maternal intercession that no other created being can offer in quite the same way. The Carmelite tradition to which Saint Teresa of Avila belonged had a special bond with the Virgin Mary from its very beginnings. Carmel was born under Mary's mantle in the most literal and most spiritual sense of that expression. And one of the deepest convictions of that tradition is that Mary does not abandon any of her children in purgatory, that her intercession reaches there with the strength of a mother who does not rest until every one of her children has come home. But that intercession is stirred, intensified, made more immediate when the living invoke it. When someone in this world takes up the rosary and offers it for a specific departed soul, they are partnering with Mary in the work of mercy she is already performing for that soul. I am not asking you to pray the entire rosary if that isn't possible right now. Saint Teresa of Avila never asked the impossible of her sisters either. What she did ask was that whatever was given be given well, with presence, with attention, with the heart engaged in what is being done, not merely with lips moving while the mind wanders somewhere else entirely. One mystery of the rosary, prayed with full attention, offered with explicit intention for your loved one, is worth more. In the logic of love that Saint Teresa of Avila taught, than 5 rosaries prayed out of habit, with the heart absent from every single one of them. On Divine Mercy Sunday, praying the rosary for your departed loved one with that attention and that intention is answering their third request as fully as it can be answered. And there is something Saint Teresa of Avila noted with particular insistence, that in seasons of extraordinary grace, Mary's presence is more intense, more active, more near, as though she too chooses those moments to incline her heart with greater generosity toward those who need her most. Let the rosary you pray today reach your loved one carrying Mary's name for what it is. The name of the mother who does not abandon any of her children, not in this world, not in the next, until every last one of them is home. But there is a fourth request, and this is the one that surprises people most the first time they hear it. Not because it demands more external effort than the ones before it, but because it reaches into something inside the one who hears it that the other three do not touch in quite the same way. Something Saint Teresa of Avila knew well, because it was something she herself had spent years learning to do, and which she confesses in the book of her life did not come easily to her. Forgiveness is the shortest word in the Christian vocabulary and the longest road to walk. Saint Teresa of Avila knew this. Not the way someone knows it who has read extensively on the subject. She knew it the way someone knows it who has actually had to forgive. In her own flesh, real offenses that were neither small nor easy to release. She knew it as someone who had knelt in the darkness of her cell, trying to let go of something her heart kept gripping with a force that willpower alone could not overcome. And precisely because she knew it that way, from the inside, at cost, when she spoke about forgiveness, she did not speak from above. She spoke from within. The fourth thing souls are asking of you this Divine Mercy Sunday is this: forgive. And to understand why this request comes from the departed toward the living, and not only from the living toward God in prayer, you need to understand something Saint Teresa of Avila taught about the bond that resentment creates between the soul that carries it and the soul that caused it. A bond that does not dissolve with death, that goes on existing as long as the heart of the living has not released it. The doctrine of the communion of saints, which we have returned to several times because it is the foundation of everything we are saying today, implies that the bonds between souls are not only bonds of love, they are also bonds of debt, of offense, of wounds left unresolved. And when a person dies, having caused harm to someone still living, and that living person hasn't yet forgiven, there exists between the departed and the living an account still open, one that the departed soul, in its new state of spiritual clarity, perceives with a sharpness it never had in life. It sees the weight of what it did. It perceives the damage it caused. It perceives that the person who loved it is still carrying that damage like a stone in the chest. And that perception is part of its purification, part of the way God's justice leads it to see its own actions through eyes that can no longer deceive themselves. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in The Interior Castle, in the context of her description of the innermost dwelling places of the soul, that perfect love cannot coexist with resentment, that the soul that holds on to bitterness has a door closed through which grace cannot freely enter or leave. And that closed door does not only affect the one keeping it shut, it affects those spiritually bound to them as well, including the departed who loved them in life and who in purgatory are still waiting for that love to mature to the point of releasing what it holds. I am not telling you forgiveness is easy. Saint Teresa of Avila never said that either. What she said is that forgiveness is possible, that it is an act of the will before it is a feeling, that you do not need to feel affection for the one who hurt you in order to look heavenward and say sincerely, I forgive you. That this act of the will, even when the heart still aches, even when the emotions haven't caught up, even when the wound hasn't fully healed, this act of the will carries a real spiritual value that moves in the invisible world with an effectiveness that would astonish us if we could see it. And there is something more. When you forgive someone who died without ever asking for your forgiveness, you are doing something that person can no longer do for themselves. You are closing a wound they left open. You are completing on this side what they could not complete before they went. And that action, according to the mystical understanding Saint Teresa of Avila had of the communion of saints, is not neutral for the departed. It reaches them. It touches something in their process of purification. It eases a weight they themselves perceive as theirs, because in the clarity of purgatory, souls see their own failures with a transparency they never had while alive. Is there someone you are carrying today who left before things between you were fully resolved? Someone who hurt you and can no longer come back to ask for forgiveness? Someone you hurt who can no longer hear you say you're sorry? Divine mercy, Sunday is the day when that account can begin to be settled. Not through a reconciliation that is no longer possible in this world, through something more real and more powerful than any conversation you could have had, through the interior act of opening your hand and letting go, through telling God in the quiet of your heart that you forgive, that you release this person, that you place them in His hands and let them go. Saint Teresa of Avila used to say that forgiveness, when genuinely given, is always also a gift we give ourselves. Because the door we close against the one who hurt us ends up trapping us as well. And opening it is not only an act of charity toward the departed, it is the most profound act of mercy you can perform today for your own soul. There is a truce Saint Teresa of Avila returns to in different forms throughout all her writing. And in the book of her life, it appears with a directness that in her voice sounds more like a tender word than a rebuke. The truth is this: the souls we love do not stop loving us when they die. Their love does not extinguish itself, does not grow cold, does not become indifference simply because they have crossed the threshold of death. On the contrary, in purgatory, freed from the weight of the disordered attachments that distorted their affections in life, souls love with a purity and an intensity they never reached while they were here. They love better, they see more clearly. And precisely because they see more clearly, they perceive things about us that perhaps, while they were still here, they could not see with such sharpness. The fifth request is the one that is hardest to hear, not because it is the most demanding in external terms, but because it touches something no one likes to be told, not the living, and if they could speak, probably not many of the departed either. The fifth request of the souls is this: take care of your soul. Take care of it in earnest. Not the way we care for things we don't want to lose, but keep neglecting because they never feel urgent. In the way you care for the one thing that will go with you when everything else stays behind. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote in The Interior Castle something that is not always grasped on first reading in its full depth. She wrote that souls in purgatory suffer in a particular way when they see those they loved in life drifting away from God. Not because their own destiny is affected, that is already secure, but because the love that binds them to their loved ones is still real, and that love cannot remain unmoved by the spiritual danger of those still making the journey. It is the suffering of a mother who, from an unbridgeable distance, watches her child walking toward the cliff and cannot cry out, cannot run, cannot reach out her hand to stop them. That is what Saint Teresa of Avila taught. And she taught it not to frighten anyone, but to reveal something that changes how we understand our relationship with the departed. When we drift from God, when we abandon prayer, when we stop going to confession, when we live as though eternal life were not real, we are not only damaging ourselves, we are adding to the suffering of those who loved us and who, from the other side, see us with a clarity we do not have about ourselves. This is not meant to produce guilt. Paralyzing guilt was never Saint Teresa of Avila's preferred instrument. She was far too wise and too compassionate for that. What she did with this truth was turn it into motivation. If you cannot find it in yourself to care for your soul for your own sake, care for it for theirs. If you cannot find the strength to pray for your own good, pray because your mother, still being purified, suffers when you don't. If you cannot find it in yourself to rise and return, rise for the love of that departed one you are carrying today, who can do nothing more than wait and love. In The Interior Castle, Saint Teresa of Avila describes the soul as a castle of diamond with many dwelling places within it. At the center of that castle is God, and the path to the center is the path of prayer, of honest self-knowledge, of the progressive purification of everything that blocks the encounter with the love that made us. That path is not traveled all at once. It is traveled each day, in small decisions and great ones, in moments of grace and moments of darkness. And every step we take on that path, we do not only draw closer to God ourselves. Something of that closeness reaches those we love who are drawing closer to Him from the other side. Caring for your soul is the quietest of all the requests your departed loved ones are directing at you today. It makes no noise. It does not produce an immediate rush of feeling. It carries none of the outward urgency of confession or the sacred weight of the Mass. But it is, according to Saint Teresa of Avila, the most persistent request of all. The one souls repeat in silence every time the living who loved them draw closer to God or pull away. The one that underlies every other request, because it is the root from which all the others grow. Live in such a way that when you too reach the threshold they have already crossed, your meeting with them is the meeting of someone who walked well, who fell and rose, who loved imperfectly but sincerely, and who arrived at last at the place where love has no limits and no distances. There is one last thing Saint Teresa of Avila said about all of this. Something that leaves the one who hears it with a feeling that is not quite peace and not quite joy, but something that contains both and exceeds them. Something that has to do with what happens in the soul of the living when they respond to these requests. Not only what follows for the departed, but what God does in the heart of those who love this way. And that is what you need to hear now, because it is the answer to the question that has been open since the very beginning. Saint Teresa of Avila had a conviction that runs through all her writing in different forms, and in the way of perfection, it reaches its most direct and most beautiful expression. The conviction is this: God cannot be outdone in generosity. That when a soul does something out of love, something that costs something that goes beyond what habit or convenience would require, God responds with a generosity that by every human measure is completely out of proportion. Not as a commercial transaction, not as an automatic reward triggered by completing a checklist, but as the natural response of infinite love to finite love trying to imitate it, as the response of a father who watches his child do something beautiful and simply cannot hold back. This conviction is the answer to the thread we have kept open since the very beginning. From the first moment we asked what happens in the soul of the living when they respond to the requests of the departed, what is received by the one who tends their state of grace, offers the Mass, prays the rosary, forgives, and cares for their soul, not only for their own sake, but out of love for those no longer here. And Saint Teresa of Avila's answer is not abstract or vague. It is concrete, grounded in her own experience, and it moves in two directions that many people don't expect when they first hear it. The first direction is toward the departed. When a living person responds to the requests of their loved one with the acts we have described, something happens in the soul still being purified. We cannot measure it. We cannot quantify it. We cannot see it with our bodily eyes. But Saint Teresa of Avila, who could perceive something of that reality, described what happened with an image she used on more than one occasion. The soul that receives a loved one's suffrages experiences something like the relief of a person carrying an unbearable weight who suddenly senses that someone on the other side of the wall has placed their hands beneath that burden and is now carrying it alongside them, not carrying it for them, carrying it with them. And that difference between alone and accompanied, even in the purifying suffering of purgatory, is a difference that changes everything. The second direction is toward the living. And this is what Saint Teresa of Avila described with the greatest wonder. as though each time she experienced it, she was surprised all over again, even though she already knew it well. When a soul does good for the departed with genuine love, God moves in that soul with a grace that bears no proportion to the effort made. The person who goes to confession out of love for their departed loved one receives in that confession not only the restoration of their grace, but something more. Something Saint Teresa of Avila would call an interior visitation, a closeness of God that exceeds what an ordinary confession produces in the soul that goes only for its own sake. The person who offers the Mass for their departed loved one leaves that Mass carrying something in their heart that was not there when they entered. The person who prays the rosary for their loved one with attention and intention discovers at some point in the prayer that they are no longer praying alone, that something is accompanying them that was not there at the start. Saint Teresa of Avila did not teach this to create self-interested devotions. She taught it because it was true, because she had lived it, and because she wanted her sisters, and all who listened to her, to understand something fundamental about the structure of love in God's plan. Love given does not diminish in the one who gives it, it multiplies. Love offered to those who can receive it from no other source returns, transformed to the one who offered it, charged with the gratitude of God, who received that love as if it had been offered directly to him. Because what you do for your departed loved ones, in the logic of the gospel that Saint Teresa of Avila lived to her very last fiber, you do for Christ, and Christ is in no one's debt. Today, on this Divine Mercy Sunday, if you have listened this far, if you are carrying someone in your heart and have decided to respond to their requests, even imperfectly, even with the incompleteness with which we all do things, you have entered into something that Saint Teresa of Avila would have recognized as one of the purest forms of Christian love. Not the love that receives, but the love that gives to one who can give nothing back in this world. The love that reaches across what appears to be an uncrossable boundary and discovers with astonishment that on the other side there is a hand reaching back. That is what your departed loved ones are asking of you this Divine Mercy Sunday. Not grand gestures, not glory. Simply that you remember them the way love informed by faith knows how to remember. That you use the instruments the Church placed in your hands precisely for moments like this one. That you do not let this day go by as though it were just another Sunday, because it is not, neither for you nor for them. And when the evening comes and the day draws to a close, may you carry in your heart the certainty that you did something real for someone who loved you, that something real reached them where they are, that it worked there what your eyes cannot see, but your faith can know with a certainty that needs no proof, because it rests on the one who cannot fail. You have made it to the end, and that is not a small thing, because what you have heard today was not easy to take in all the way through, not because it was dark or sorrowful, but because it touched something most people prefer to leave at the surface, something that aches with the good ache of truths that set you free when you let them fully in. You have come to understand who your departed loved ones truly are, where they are, what they feel, what they perceive from that place where love is seen without the distortions that earthly life imposes. You have grasped why Divine Mercy Sunday is not an ordinary Sunday, not for the living and not for those who have already passed. You have heard the 5 requests your loved ones are directing toward you today with an urgency that purified love only makes more intense, not less. The confession that restores the channel through which grace flows. The Mass that carries Christ's sacrifice where no private prayer can reach alone. The rosary that accompanies the waiting soul with Mary's presence. The forgiveness that closes wounds that death left open. And the care of your own soul. The quietest request and the most persistent, the one underlying all the others, because it is the root from which all the others grow. You have not simply spent this time listening to words. You have been doing something, because to hear truth with an open heart is already a spiritual act. It is already a form of responding, already the first movement of a love that has decided to get up and act. Saint Teresa of Avila used to say that God never asks anyone for more than they can give, but that to the one who gives what they can, he gives what they lack. Today, you have given what you could, and what you still lack to complete it, God is already placing in your path. Your departed loved one is not far away. They are where God's love holds them, while His mercy finishes in them the work that life did not have time to complete. And today, on this Sunday, that the Church has marked as the day of mercy without limits, you have reached your hand across to them from this side, that is real, that arrives, that works. And one day, when you too cross that threshold we will all cross, you will understand, with the clarity only the other side can give, how much what you did today truly mattered. There is something I want to ask of you before this day is over. Something small that will cost you nothing but carries a value you may not be able to imagine. Write right now in the comments the name of the departed loved one you have been carrying in your heart today. Just their name, nothing more. You don't need to explain who they were or when they left or how you lost them. Just their name. Because the space we have shared today is not a space for entertainment or for information. It is a space for prayer. And when you write that name here, you are placing it in the midst of a community of people who, like you, love someone no longer here and believe that love can still do something for them. That is the communion of saints made into a concrete gesture in today's world. The name you write will be seen by people you have never met, who will pray for them without knowing them either, because that is how love works in the body of Christ, without borders, without conditions, without requiring that those who love one another have ever met in this life. Write it, right now, while your heart is still open and the name is still on your lips. And now I need to say something more, something about what comes after today. Because Divine Mercy's Sunday passes the way all Sundays pass, the way all the extraordinary graces God sets within time pass. But the spiritual journey does not pass. The spiritual journey is for every day, for every week, for every season. The Church's liturgical year unfolds before us like a map of salvation that can be traveled if one learns to read it. And there is something I want you to know. What you heard today is only part of that map, a beautiful and necessary part, but only part. Saint Teresa of Avila did not write one book. She wrote several, and in each one, the same truth appears from a different angle, with a different depth, illuminating a dimension of the soul the others left in shadow. That is how the spiritual life works. It does not exhaust itself in a single afternoon or a single teaching. It unfolds, it grows, it deepens, as the soul receiving it also grows and deepens. And there are truths about faith, about prayer, about the departed, about the mysteries of what lies beyond, about the way God moves in souls still journeying in this world. Truths that are waiting to be heard. Truths that Saint Teresa of Avila set down with that pen of hers that never knew how to be cold, that always burned with the same fire burning within her. When this video ends, another one will appear. Don't let it go. Don't set it aside for later, for when you have more time, for when you feel more settled. Because the time we think we have for spiritual growth is always less than we calculate. And the grace God offers in one moment does not always return with the same intensity if we let it pass. What Saint Teresa of Avila taught about prayer, about the soul, about the mysteries surrounding death and the life that follows, it is a treasure the Church has guarded for centuries, and it deserves to be known not halfway, but in its fullness. Every video you watch is one more step into the castle she spoke of, one more step towards the center where the love that holds everything resides. Subscribe to this channel right now. Don't delay. Don't leave it for when you remember. Because in the noise of daily life, what moves us today can easily be buried under the weight of the urgent things that always crowd out what truly matters. Subscribe and turn on notifications so that each time something new arrives from Saint Teresa of Avila, it reaches you without your having to search for it. Because this channel exists for one reason alone, so that the wisdom of a woman who knew God in a way very few human beings ever have may reach your life regularly, consistently, faithfully. The way grace comes when the soul has learned to remain open. Your departed loved ones need you to keep growing. Your own soul needs you to keep growing. And this is one of the places where that growth can happen, week by week, with the voice of Saint Teresa of Avila as your guide, and with the certainty that the path she walked is the same path you are walking. Only she arrived before you, and from where she is, she can point you in the direction with the clarity of someone who has already seen the end. We have reached the end of this time together, and I am deeply glad you made it here, that you allowed these words in, that you let the name of your loved one occupy the center of your heart during this hour, instead of leaving it in that corner where we sometimes keep them, so we don't cry at the wrong moment. The love you feel for them is not a burden, it is a grace. It is the sign that the bond which united you in this world was not broken by their death. It was transformed into something that, when directed well, can reach them where they are and do for them what nothing else in this world can do. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote that whoever has God lacks nothing, that God alone is enough. That in the certainty of that love which never ends, which holds both those still walking and those still waiting, there is a peace the world can neither give nor take away. That peace is yours today, if you receive it. Your loved one is in the hands of the only love that is greater than death. May God bless you. May the Virgin Mary walk with you. And may Saint Teresa of Avila intercede for you and for the soul of that beloved person you have carried in your heart today, now and in the hour when you too cross over to the side where love no longer has limits. Until next time.